The uproarious applause.
Hello, everyone. Welcome so much for being here. I'd like to introduce everyone to bring on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I'm sorry to keep everybody waiting.
This sounds great.
16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights.
And now they're evil.
Democrats
Yes,
stood
we know.
against
We know the grift.
authoritarianism,
You were paid to do
against
this.
censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money.
Yep.
When it abandoned democracy,
So I'm endorsing a billionaire who's backed by the fossil fuel lobby.
The cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. The mainstream of American politics and journalism derided my decision. Conventional wisdom said that it would be impossible even to get on the ballot as an independent because each state
And they were
poses
right.
an
He didn't get in the ballot in a lot of
insurmountable
places.
of arbitrary rules for collecting signatures. I would need over 1 million signatures, something no presidential candidate in history had ever achieved. And then I'd need a team of attorneys and millions of dollars to handle all the legal challenges from the DNC. The naysayers told us that we were climbing a glass version of Mount Impossible. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we proved them wrong. We did it because beneath the radar of mainstream media organs, we inspired a massive...
I should add right here, because I know this is going to be a segment, and some people who are watching me might not be familiar with this, okay? RFK Jr. is a soulless grifter. If you go on his campaign website, he looks like he's a progressive with the stuff that he says he cares about with his policy platform. The only things he talks about are conspiracy theories, especially with regard to like vaccine. He has directly caused the death of many, many young people through his vaccine skepticism, a thing for which he has not only not apologized, but openly denied. He is genuinely evil. I think that a lot of his evil is the fact, it like stems from him being legitimately crazy. Like, I actually do think he's mentally, like, yeah, I genuinely do think he's not all there. But he was weaponized in this campaign cycle by the Republicans, given money and direction to run as a Democrat to pull votes from then Joe Biden, now Kamala Harris. The problem is that RFK Jr. is fundamentally unlikable, and Democrats don't actually want him at all. He coasted by for a while based on name recognition because he is a Kennedy, but when it comes to actually like listening to him or hearing his policies or the sort of things that he cares about, all the weird anti-Semitic conspiracism and autism bit and all, like everything that he, you know, goes on and on about, he was not effective in pulling votes from Democrats. In fact, he ended up pulling more votes from Republicans, especially after he dropped out of the Democratic primary process and ran as an independent. So the reason he is now dropping out is because he has been directly pressured to do so by Republicans. You can literally see a shift in the way RFK Jr. was talked about, where at first, Republicans were favorable towards him because they knew he was being a wedge against Joe Biden. Then after he dropped out and started pulling more votes from Donald Trump, they started attacking him quite a bit in right-wing media. And now that it's become clear that he is currently, but in the weeks leading up to this, it was also quite clear he was going to drop out and endorse Donald Trump, possibly in exchange for him getting a cabinet position in the Trump administration. They started treating him favorably again. You can literally look at his tweets And depending on the date, it'll be full of right-wingers either glazing him or attacking him. Entirely down to whether or not at that moment he was fulfilling his purpose of assisting Donald Trump for the presidency. So, yeah.
Independent political movement. More than 100,000 volunteers sprang into action, hopeful that they could reverse our nation's decline. Many worked 10-hour days, sometimes in blizzards and blazing heat. They sacrificed family time, personal commitments, and sleep month after month, energized by a shared vision of a nation healed of its divisions. They set up tables at churches and farmers' markets. They canvassed door to door. In Utah and in New Hampshire, volunteers collected signatures in snowstorms, convincing each supporter to stop in the frigid cold, to take off their gloves, and to sign legibly. During a heat wave in Nevada, I met a tall, athletic volunteer who cheerfully told me that he had lost 25 pounds collecting signatures in 117-degree heat. To finance this effort, young Americans donated their lunch money, and senior citizens gave up part of their Social Security checks. Our 50-state organization collected those millions of signatures and more. No presidential campaign in American political history has ever done that. And so I want to thank all of those dedicated volunteers and congratulate the campaign staff who coordinated this enormous logistics.
This was RFK Jr. just 3 months ago, by the way. Yeah, here. President Trump scammed American workers. He promised to bring back manufacturing, raise wages, fix trade deals. Da-da-da-da-da. This is all him attacking Donald Trump. And if you take a look at the comments, here's the top one right here. RFK Jr. continues to expose himself as a far-left candidate by regurgitating far-left talking points. He's just like Biden, except he's anti-vax. This was from May, back when he had dropped out of the Democratic primary and he was actually pulling more votes from Donald Trump. His positions and his support fluctuate depending on, like, he believes in nothing. He is either enough of a grifter or mentally weak enough that he can just be led around by the nose. You know, that's it.
Feat. Your accomplishments were regarded as impossible. You carried me up that glass mountain. You pulled off a miracle. You achieved what all the pundits said could never be done. You have my deepest gratitude, and I'm never going to forget that, not just for what you did for my campaign, but for the sacrifices you made because you love our country. You showed everyone that democracy is still possible here. It continues to survive in the press and in the idealistic human energies that still thrive beneath the canvas of neglect and of official and institutional corruption. Today, I'm here to tell you that I will not allow your efforts to go to waste. I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments
to endorse,
to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign. I'm here today to describe the path forward that you've opened with your commitment and with your hard labors. Now,
you listen to the Behind the Bastards on him. It's literally like every new thing you learn about him, he's more evil than you thought. Yeah. I keep in mind, when I say he's like mentally ill, I'm not trying to make him seem like a hapless victim of circumstance or whatever. He is an evil person. He is a rapist. As far as I'm concerned, a murderer with the vaccine rhetoric that he's pushed and the people who died in American Samoa. You know, he's a freak. He's a ghoul. He stole screws from the Challenger. Exactly. The Trump call. Yeah, the leaked by his son, if I remember correctly. His son, because by all of RFK Jr.'s family, not all of it, I shouldn't say all of it, that's hyperbole. A lot of his family has come out and said that he shouldn't be running for varying reasons, you know? And his son, like, took a candid video of him on the phone with Donald Trump, where they were both talking like allies, because they are allies. This was the point where it became obvious from like an external perspective, the extent to which he was directly on the books of Donald Trump, as opposed to just being a convenient ally in certain times.
It's meant for a horse, not a 10-pound or 20-pound baby. It looks like you should be giving a horse this. And do you ever see the size of it? Right, it's this massive.
Talking about horses.
In a system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system the kind that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates, with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debates, with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship, in a system of nonpartisan courts.
This is something that people like RFK Jr. like to do. They like to talk about the unfairness of the system. They like to talk about censorship and collusion. And I think those are all good things to talk about. The problem is, again, this is literally a deliberate spoiler candidate funded by dark money. We're going to get like tell-all books in the future about how obvious the corruption was behind the scenes. This is one of the reasons why, again, and I've always said this, it's important to not just agree with people on the problems, but on the solutions. Donald Trump talks about our corrupt media, but when he talks about corrupt media, he often is complaining about the media accurately reporting on things that he's done and said that are politically inconvenient for him. It's not enough to hear him say like, oh yeah, the media is corrupt, there's an establishment bias. Yeah, of course, obviously there is. What do you want to do about it? And then it turns out like, this is all leading up to a concession and endorsement of Donald Trump, who wants to further every one of those problems.
And election boards, everything would be different. After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups.
This is not correct.
But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election.
I don't need to like pause this and explain how all of this is A, incorrect or embellished, and B, just like obvious right-wing grifter rhetoric, right? The shadowy coup appointer, like what is like this is all of this is meant to like this is meant to appeal to the conspiracy margin voter who like they actually did this exact same thing back in 2016, if you'll recall. Well, actually, hold on, I think they've done it in all of the elections. In 2016, President Trump needled, well, not then President Trump, Donald Trump needled the Democrats for shafting Bernie in the primary process, talking about how corrupt their process was, which again, it was, but Donald Trump doesn't care about that. He did the same thing in 2020, and now we get this, it's meant to appeal to that like wedge conspiracist, but it's not indicative of any real interest in addressing the issue. In this case, there was no issue, There was nothing wrong with Joe Biden dropping out.
They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate.
See, this right here is transparent grifter rhetoric. The implication that nobody likes Kamala Harris because she lost the primary in 2020. That's how primaries work. Is the implication then that if you lose a primary, you should never be allowed to run for a primary again? Because if you win the second primary, it doesn't make sense because you lost the first one? That doesn't make any sense. Also, her favorability ratings right now, given the context, are through the roof.
They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose?
None of this has anything to do with democracy. This is just picking and choosing random factoids in an effort to present the results as undemocratic. It's serious. It's literally like the right wing, like Joe Biden is too old to serve. The Democrats, you're right. So we're actually going to go with Kamala Harris, and she's going to be unanimously voted in as the, you know, as the primary victor. No, you can't do that. Doesn't mean anything, man.
When they
Not
don't
like that.
know whom they are choosing. And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, a role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world.
He's literally repeating all the talking points, very boring. Well, it's all the right-wing talking points, yeah. There's no actual sincere third-party criticism of the establishment and its bias here, because if there was, he would be going after Trump as well. But of course he's not, you know. Like, for instance, he might talk about the fact that a significant portion of Republican voters wish that somebody other than Donald Trump was a viable candidate for their primary process, but obviously it didn't matter because Trump stomped DeSantis and Nikki Haley and just got accepted in as the sort of like accepted de facto presidential candidate. But despite losing the presidential election in 2020, though, of course, RFK would never acknowledge that Donald Trump lost in 2020 at this point, considering who he's being paid by.
Showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing.
See, it's not she was popular because she hit the ground running and had a campaign team that inherited the money from Biden's campaign and immediately started like making good decisions with presentation. It's the shadowy media organ started promoting her based on nothing with engineered popularity. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just empty conspiracy rhetoric. It doesn't pertain to or relate to anything. I know you guys know this. I know that, like, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. It's just, I think that a lot of people, and I want to be honest with you, a lot of low IQ people hear stuff like this and they get swayed by it because they forget the almighty rule, you know? Agreeing on the problem isn't enough. You have to agree on the solution. Learn to recognize biased rhetoric. When is a person trying to, like, sell you? I mean, you want to talk about engineered popularity, okay. What about engineered language in general? Are we meant to believe this is unbiased? Of course not. It's just, I know a lot of people are susceptible to this.
No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly...
She has policy positions. She agreed to do debates. Donald Trump was the one who tried to weasel out of it. What? She also has balloons. That's also true.
Produce Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate?
They have both. It's pretty typical to talk about your opposing candidate in a convention. That's normal.
In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every...
That's the reason they did that, is because they knew there was a very real chance that Biden was going to be ousted at that point. And in fact, Donald Trump even said in his acceptance speech at the RNC, they told me not to say his name. I'm only going to say his name once. So they were operating out of a kind of strategic ambiguity there, you know? Also, who cares? There's nothing wrong with attacking Donald Trump.
day. Many of you have interviewed me, anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do
Because
as
you're
many
desperate.
as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate?
Kamala Harris has never done an interview and a debate. We're just saying shit, man. Kamala Harris has never had hair. How can you trust a woman who has never once had hair? What? Hello? Hello?
During the entire election cycle, we know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by
What government agencies? I'm sorry, what apparatuses of the federal government were used to make people like Kamala Harris? Was it the Department of Defense? Was it the Department of Energy? Which of them, what did they do? Shadowy conspiracy shit doesn't mean anything, though. It's literally just completely empty nothing.
abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the resort to censorship and media control and the weaponization of the
He's such a whiny little crybaby. I mean, yeah, like this is what he's paid to do. I have to say, though, ultimately, I do think that this has been a massive failure for the Republicans. They managed to buy a Kennedy running with the Democrats, and he floundered it because he's so crazy that he wasn't actually able to appeal to Democratic voters. Genuinely curious, though, don't you feel cucked shilling for the pig VP from the Palestinian Genocide Administration? I mean, maybe you think so highly of politicians that your support for them over another, you consider that like a sexual act, you know? To me, it's a pretty basic utilitarian choice that takes like 2 seconds of thought. Is Donald Trump worse than Kamala Harris? Yes, then there you go. But, you know, you can, you might ascribe a lot of like personal weight to the decision, but as a leftist, I understand that electoral action is a tiny, tiny component of the broader spread of class consciousness. You should read into that, man. You should read into like you know, manufacturing consent or Satan revolution, just basic stuff, you know? Start at step 1. Anyway, altogether, I would consider this like a massive failure from the Republican side, because you'd think they would have been a lot more successful. Like this concession and endorsement of Trump is like the most obvious turnabout. Like everyone saw this coming. I called this months ago, you know? So can you imagine how badly this would have gone for us if RFK Jr. wasn't a crank? Like, imagine if he was intelligent enough and competent enough to actually win over Democratic voters, and then this dropout endorsement was a huge surprise, like a month before the election or something like that, you know? Or are we digging through that person's chat messages and it turns out that they're crazy, like everyone else who disagrees with me? Yeah.
agencies. When a U.S. president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression, and that's the very right.
It's a good thing that Donald Trump has never attacked media agencies. Remember when after Donald Trump got shot at, there were people booing the media pit like you did this? That's a great precedent to set.
Upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide.
Oh, shit. Oh, we're going here? We're going here? Okay, all right, all right.
In the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just like Vladimir Putin, that's true. I mean, Putin, like, kills his opponents and all the media in Russia is state-controlled. And what's the conspiracy happening with the DNC right now? That the primary process didn't have debate? Like, what are we complaining about? Like, the comparable equivalent would be if Joe Biden could have RFK Jr. thrown out of a window right now.
From appearing on the ballot. And our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. Over the course of more than a year in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s, the DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews. From
Too many, in my humble opinion.
me.
Again, this is what I mean by he was a huge failure. He was such a crank out the gate that he wasn't able to actually, like, work as a good spoiler candidate, you know? Like, he was an irrelevant crank from day one, and his poll numbers, to the extent that they ever existed, were only a consequence of his name recognition. He never managed to, like, capture the heart of the American public.
Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now. And
Remember that pathetic attempt that he made to get on the debate stage with Joe Biden and Donald Trump? Like, he wanted to do a 3-way debate, even though no one cared about him or was voting for him. That he was, like, putting out Twitter ads for it. He was like, let ABC bring me on, you know?
I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fear, skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power.
How long is this going to go on? He's just, like, he's been saying the same thing for, like, 20 minutes now. Everything bad that ever happened to me was because the DNC and Joe Biden used the government to hurt me personally because they're evil and corrupt. And it definitely wasn't because I was unelectable and sound like shit and was sort of a conspiracy crank from day one. Every time RFK Jr. got a little wave of media attention, it was after he said some horrendously awful shit, you know? The COVID virus is targeted to not affect Jews. Him admitting to raping the nurse who worked at the estate, you know? And then when he was asked about it, he was like, I'm no church boy. I've probably raped lots of people, actually. Like, what the like, every time he got attention, it was just because the bear thing in Central Park, you know? It's it. That's the only reason he's ever been able to get attention, is because he's bad. That's it. He's weird. It was the nanny, not the nurse. Sorry, nanny, not the nurse.
This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America.
Here, let me look that up, because that's a pretty strong claim.
Biden have a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States.
Okay. RFK Jr. wins deferred injunction in Vax social media suit? Is this what we're talking about? This is from February 15th. Won a preliminary injunction against the White House and other federal defendants in his suit alleging government censorship of his statements against vaccines on social media. The injunction will be stayed until the U.S. Supreme Court rules in a related case. Is it merits claim? What was the censorship? The White House defendants, the Surgeon General defense, the Secretary of Defense likely violated the free speech clause of the First Amendment, Doty said. Okay, what did he do? Oh, this was about the federal government pressuring social media to censor COVID misinfo. It really is crazy how this is the only thing that he cares about. The only thing he's ever been attached to. The only thing that he's ever like gone out there and made political statements on. He doesn't talk about anything else. It's all just vaccine skepticism. That's it. Oh, and then the Supreme Court tossed out that claim. The majority Republican Supreme Court tossed out claim Biden administration coerced social media companies to remove content. So there you go, I guess.
United States of America. His previous 155
Oh, and what's the name of the judge again?
How just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency, it's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking into this judge. This guy's only notable rulings since becoming a circuit court judge have been about vaccine denialism. In 2021, Doty issued a nationwide injunction against a federal mandate that healthcare workers be vaccinated against COVID-19. His opinion repeated debunked claims made by Dr. Peter McCullough, including that vaccines are not useful because booster shots recommended after 6 months, vaccines do not present the transmission of the disease, and the virus has achieved an immune escape from COVID-19 vaccines. A cardiologist, McCullough was fired from his position as vice chief of internal medicine at Baylor. So this judge was repeating statements of a person who was fired for being essentially a vaccine denier. So that explains the reason why he gave this ruling on the on RFK Jr.'s case, his injunction against the Biden administration. RFK Jr. almost certainly shopped around for the district to file the injunction in, so this guy would rule on it. Yeah, he filed it there. It's like district shopping. Like, I want my case against Joe Biden for personally banning me from Twitter for being a COVID denier or whatever. I want that to be presided over by the known anti-vax judge, you know? The judge was even overruled by the crazy conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals for going too far. He was struck down by the Supreme Court. Yeah, no corruption here.
Days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, and has joined this systemic attack on democracy. It also, the media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation, but governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor.
It's literally all COVID denialism. That's it. From beginning to end. That's his entire life. That's his career. That's all of it. It's just conspiracism. That's it.
And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint.
It is. You are doing nothing but personally complain. Literally, the entire concession speech has been you whining about everyone being mean to you. That's the whole thing. That's all you've been talking about.
It's not.
You haven't mentioned the American public once. You haven't talked at all about the American people.
For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up
Still
with.
talking about you.
But I need to make these observations.
I need to.
I think they're critical for us.
Oh, he said us.
Doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like.
His metric for a healthy democracy is how much he's allowed to lie about vaccines. That's like the only, that's his metric for, social well-being.
And the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke? And here's the good news. While mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform,
Me.
they didn't shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters, thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago,
He means like the Joe Rogan podcast and stuff like that.
I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this.
And published a yeah, Thana, that was the craziest thing that I learned from the John Oliver segment. This RFK Jr. published a book on like the harm of vaccines, which had on its cover a child who had died, except the child died not from a vaccine. It had nothing to do with a vaccine. He died from something else. And the parents asked him to not put their dead son on the book cover, whose death had nothing to do with vaccines. And they hastily republished it without him on the cover, but the kid was still in the book. they just changed the cover. They didn't change the book, like the contents inside. Not his book, but he endorsed it. Sorry. He didn't publish it. He he contributed to it? He spoke out in favor of it extensively and promoted it. The foreword. He wrote the foreword. Okay, the foreword. Something like that.
Systematic censorship and media control.
Not like the other kids in the cover died from vaccines either. It's just the one kid had demonstrably never even had a vaccine. Yeah, that's what I meant. I apologize. The brain rot, the worms are getting into me too. It's the mind flayer parasites corroding me. The kid who was on there who had died hadn't even been vaccinated, Basically, everyone who has ever died from the vaccine has died from something else, and then grifters latch on to their death as a way of like promoting their podcast, where they talk about how everyone who's ever gotten vaccinated is like a ticking time bomb or whatever. Remember how when the vaccines were first rolling out, it was pretty common rhetoric from Republicans to say that every vaccine taker was going to die within a few years? Remember?
So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats with whom I disagree.
But with how egregiously the Democrats have destroyed American democracy through collusion between media and the federal government, I have no choice but to endorse Donald Trump, a man with whom I have many disagreements, but is nonetheless fighting for transparency in government and an end to the deep state. Right.
Existential issues, censorship, war, and chronic disease. Oh, I want everyone to know.
Oh, speaking of war, for an anti-establishment candidate, RFK Jr. is shockingly Zionist. He's not one of those like, yeah, drop out of everything, pull out every troop kind of guys. He is very Zionist. More so than Biden.
Not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it.
What?
And not ending it.
What?
My name will remain on the ballot in most states.
Yeah?
If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me.
Wait,
And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win...
Wait, why is he saying this makes him not a spoiler? This makes him a spoiler. This makes him more of a spoiler. This is the most you can spoil, like having a dead campaign that stays on the ballot. This is the most a person can spoil. This is the spoilingest you can be. Wait, hold on.
270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact,
Silence. The
today
worms
our
are speaking.
polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10
He's pulling out for swing states only. I want to see which states he's pulling out of.
battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption,
I'm not going to lie. I don't know what's going on or why this is happening. Donald Trump was even making favorable statements about RFK Jr. earlier. Too much ego? Is it literally an ego thing? Is he driving? He's been difficult to control, like, from the start. Is this it? Is he actually, like, I don't think it's incompetence. I think it's Donald Trump was, like, speaking favorably of RFK Jr. just the other day. I guarantee you that Trump expected RFK Jr. to fully endorse him. I mean, he is still probably going to endorse, right?
Our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard in the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And now,
is he not endorsing? There's already a statement out from his sister. We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future, a future defined by individual freedom. We believe in Harrison Walls. Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of those values. This came out 15 minutes ago, but we're behind in the VOD. Yeah, okay, so either he endorses in the time span of the next 6 minutes because of how time works, but that was written beforehand. So is it just presumed that he... I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea. I have no idea.
President Trump, the causes were free speech, a war in Ukraine, and the war on our children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government's censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military industrial complex has provided us with a familiar comic book justification like they do on every war. That this one is a noble effort to stop a supervillain, Vladimir Putin, invading the Ukraine. And
there was a state campaign filing that stated his endorsement of Trump. I know. So where is it then?
Thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle initiated by the ambitions of the U.S. neocons for American global hegemony. I'm not excusing Putin for invading Ukraine. He had other options.
He had other options? You know, it was one of a few things he could have done, and I wasn't like for options for what? I guess there was the not invading option, I suppose. That's a very weird way of putting it. Him saying the Ukraine is a dead giveaway. Yeah, like, there are connections between RFK Jr. and Russian outlet. Like, it's always the case. Always, always, always. American third parties, they're always... He's literally like a fake spoiler candidate backed by the right. We know exactly, like, where all this, you know, is at least supported from.
The war is Russia's predictable response to the reckless neocon project of extending NATO to encircle Russia, a hostile act.
Same talking
points. The credulous media rarely explain to Americans that we unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russia and then put nuclear-ready Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland. This is a hostile act. And that the Biden White House repeatedly spurned Russia's offer to settle this war peacefully.
On the condition that Ukraine completely de-arm and cede the territory that it's lost to Russia, and also promise to never enact like any military treaties in the future, and also not expand its military after this. Basically, yeah, like all of Russia's peace treaties are, what if you made yourself ripe for the picking next year?
The Ukraine war began in 2014 when U.S. agencies overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine.
Didn't happen. It was a popular revolution, Euromaidan, by Ukrainian people. Again, these are literally just Russian state media talking points. Probably they gave them $5 to say it, you know. Pretty common among conspiracists, but yeah, I see this stuff all the time.
And installed a hand-picked pro-Western government.
Nope. The people were more pro-Western than Russia wanted. That's why they invaded in 2014. There's absolutely no evidence to support the claim that America handpicked the government that replaced Yanukovych.
That launched a deadly civil war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine.
No, ethnic Russians in Ukraine were not targeted in a deadly civil war. In reality, Russian troops and paid separatists in the Donbass attacked government facilities in their local areas in an effort to form a breakaway state. There was no, like, initial military action taken against ethnic Russians. In fact, since a lot of ethnic Russians did in fact live in the Donbass, which is closer to Russia, a lot of them suffered immensely under the invasion from Russia.
In 2019, America walked away from a peace treaty, the Minsk Agreement.
No, we didn't. The Minsk Accords, both 1 and 2, were flawed from the get-go, and Russia broke them immediately.
Negotiated between Russia and Ukraine by European nations. And then in April of 2022, we wanted the war.
No, we did not. We simply reported that it was going to happen as Russia put hundreds of thousands of their soldiers up against the border of Ukraine. We did not want the war. Russia wanted the war. That is why Russia did the war.
In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine.
Boris Johnson is a free agent and is not on the payroll of the United States. The only reason you would say Biden sent Boris Johnson is if you were engaging in like insane conspiracism, the idea that like every bad thing you don't like has to come back to the American government. Are we going to get some like Assad defending going on here as well? Like, are we going to talk about how you know, Assad really is winning 99.9% of the vote in Syria?
Forced President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians.
No, President Zelensky was not forced to doing anything. There's literally no evidence of this. Boris Johnson does not have the authority to force Zelensky to do anything. That's not how things work. That's not how the government works.
Had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops.
No, they weren't. Russia had no intention of ending the war at that point. The peace deals that have been discussed thus far, Russia will literally not consider any peace deal that does not include them holding the territory that they've already invaded and conquered, and Ukraine disarming.
Kiev.
This really is full-blown every Russian piece of propaganda. Yeah, remember, basically every far-right political party in the Western world has financial ties to Russian oligarchs. Basically every one of them. It's not because Russia's like the secret puppet master or whatever. It's just that Russian oligarchs have an ungodly amount of money. The Kremlin has an ungodly amount of money, and they don't spend it on their people, you know? The average Russian is out there wiping their ass with frozen leaves and wrestling bears to get the meat for the winter, you know? The median quality of life and the amount of government spending that Russia engages on, like, for its citizenry is miserable. Russia has like 3 actual cities and then just infinite wasteland, some of which might as well be borderline medieval in its level of development. They don't spend the money they get from their incredible natural reserve of resources on the people. They spend it on shit like this. Same with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is also a petrostate, where they do not spend a ton of money on like civic development, but rather on influencing other elections to their own benefit, you know?
Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His defense.
No, he did not say that. He said that he didn't know how, with somebody as monstrous and bloodthirsty as Putin, the war was going to end. That's not saying his objective was regime change in Russia. It is not. It does not mean that you are pushing for regime change as the president if you argue that the warmongering other foreign leader is like not amenable to peace.
Secretary Lloyd Austin simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world.
Yes, when we supply Ukraine weapons and assist them, it is to our benefit in a geopolitical sense because Russia is exhausting its military capabilities against armed Ukraine. The alternative would be they simply conquer Ukraine and remain strong and ready to conquer again, which would be bad. This is like very basic geopolitics. It's not even imperialism. It's anti-imperialism. Russia is the imperial force, and by breaking themselves against the rock that is an armed Ukraine, they are less likely to be able to engage in imperialism, both against Ukraine and other countries.
These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty.
They're actually like completely directly linked. Protecting Ukrainian sovereignty and making Ukraine strong enough to weaken Russia are both the exact same thing. They're one-to-one. You can't actually do one without doing the other. They're both the same objective.
Ukraine is a victim in this war, and it's a victim of...
That is true. It is a victim of Russia, but you're going to say American imperialism.
...of the West.
Right. Yeah.
Since then, of Russia and both Russia and the West.
By the way, I have to say, I think what we're seeing right now is a mixture of crankery and competing paychecks, because the Trump campaign knows this. Even though Trump is largely pro-Putin, this does not sell with the American people, which is why Trump's language is, if I was president, they never would have invaded Ukraine, and not a 63-minute repeat of Kremlin talking points about how actually like NATO expansionism is the reason why da-da-da-da-da, and Euromaidan was a Western coup and da-da-da-da, and, you know, persecution of Russian ethnic people, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's a reason why the Republicans aren't usually just regurgitating Kremlin propaganda. Americans don't care. But RFK Jr., who is, again, a crank and being paid to be a crank from multiple sources, is kind of like clashing here. We are so lucky that he was crazy and incompetent, man. We are so lucky, dude. Can you imagine if this guy was actually capable of appealing to Americans? His pseudo-endorsement might actually be worth something.
Since then, we have, since tearing up that agreement, forcing Zelensky to tear up the agreement,
we did not.
We've squandered the flower of Ukrainian youth, as many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids, and over 100,000 Russian kids, all of whom we should be mourning.
Wait, I don't think 600,000 Ukrainian kids are dead. I don't think that's true. That's a lot of kids. I don't think that's true. Does he mean total soldier deaths? If he means total soldier deaths, him saying 600,000 Ukrainians and 100,000 Russians is the most I've been paid directly by the Kremlin thing I've ever heard in my life. Yeah, Ukraine's a victim of the West. They have lost 8.3 million soldiers, whereas Russia has lost 4. Like, what are you talking about, dude? That's World War III numbers of dead kids. Yeah. The idea, like, when he's, like, pretending to mourn the victims, the Ukrainians, repeating in that moment propaganda, which is meant to make them look weak. Yeah, dude. Uh-huh.
Have died, and the Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed. The war has been a disaster for our country as well. We squandered nearly 200...
The infrastructure argument is pretty tough, though. It's tough to beat because Russia never had any infrastructure to begin with. Have you seen some of the villages that Ukrainians have been invading in Kursk? When I say a lot of Russia is borderline medieval, I'm not kidding. Like, we're genuinely talking about the largest country on Earth by landmass, and a lot of it makes parts of West Virginia look wealthy. You know? It's pretty bad. It looks like a Tarkov map. Yeah, you don't even need a post-apocalypse to make most of Russia look that way. Yeah, casualties, NE, but he said deaths. If we mean casualties, then sure, but that includes injuries, you know?
$100 billion already, and these are badly squandered nearly. The war has been a disaster for our country as well.
It has not.
We squandered nearly $200 billion already.
No, we did not. The aid that we provide Ukraine is largely in the form of our old weapon stockpiles, weapons that we don't use anymore. Our weapons are shiny, very new. We're giving Ukraine mostly stuff that we're not going to use anyway. Like, what are we going to do with it? Just decommission it in a decade anyway? No big. 20% of Russia literally has no indoor plumbing. Yeah, because they use that money. The Russian state uses that money for this sort of thing. Yachts for their oligarchs, foreign interference, that sort of thing.
And these are badly needed dollars in our communities suffering.
They're not dollars. Our communities do not need like weapons that were built in 1976. Like me going down to like the poorest section of Oakland with a bunch of 88mm shells. Like, I'm here to help.
Communities all over our country. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and the sanctions have destroyed Europe's industrial base, which formed the bulwark of U.S. national security.
Damn, maybe they shouldn't have decommissioned all those nuclear plants. That's kind of a skill issue on them. Sorry, I don't really care. That's a lot of them is like really bad policy making for Western Europe to rely on energy from Russia after 2014. The annexation of Crimea, the invasion of the Donbass, and then for 8 years afterwards, Western European nations continued to lean into the Russia for their energy needs. Stupid idiots.
Strong Germany with a
Did I say chimera? Crimea.
Strong industry is a much stronger deterrent to Russia, and a Germany that is deindustrialized and turned into just an extension of U.S. military base.
Kind of crazy how all these people who claim to love America have nothing but bad things to say about America, you know? This kind of rhetoric makes a lot more sense when you're a Twitter leftist who talks about how you want America to sink into the sea. But when you're a Kennedy who otherwise is like, yeah, America, beautiful beacon of democracy, and then you're going on a tirade about how we're the source of all evil in the world, it comes across a little bit contrary.
We've pushed Russia into a disastrous alliance with China and Iran.
That's so true, man. Russia, China, and Iran definitely weren't in their own block prior to 2022. That's so true. You know, they hated each other. And well, China and Russia and Iran do kind of hate each other, but they were still in with each other. You know how it is.
We're closer to the brink of nuclear exchange than at any time since 1962.
Nah, I don't think so. Remember, folks, nothing ever happens.
And the neocons in the White House don't seem to care at all. Our moral authority and our economy are in shambles, and the war gave rise to the emergence of BRICS, which now
First of all, BRICS existed beforehand. Second of all, are you seriously about to say that BRICS is threatening our international...
threatens to replace the dollar as the...
Oh my God. Dude, how are you repeating this rhetoric as a presidential candidate? Are you kidding me? This is literally like if somebody went up on stage and they were like, hello, my name is Kennedy, I love America. Now let me explain to you how Hillary Clinton stopped Gaddafi from dethroning the US dollar as the global reserve currency. Like, what are you talking about? BRICS just recently surpassed the combined GDP of Walmart. Yeah, BRICS is a joke. Incredible. Again, he's literally just like a bundle of conspiracy theories and like paid op positions. He's taken money from Trump, so he has to talk about how the DNC is corrupt and censoring him. He's taken money from Russia, so he has to talk about how, NATO expansionism forced Russia to invade Ukraine, and also American hegemony is being threatened by BRICS. BRICS!
The global reserve currency. This is a first-class calamity for our country. Judging by her bellicose, belligerent speech last...
Isn't BRICS crippled by the fact that half the countries in it don't like each other? It literally isn't a thing. BRICS is not a thing. Brazil, ally to the United States. Lula and Biden get along. Russia, crippling sanctions so bad that Chinese banks are like struggling to do business with them because that would get them sanctioned too. India, on very bad terms with China. China, one of America's greatest trading partners. South Africa, an ally of the United States. It literally doesn't... Yeah. Modi just visited Ukraine today. Did he? Oh, I didn't know that.
Tonight in Chicago, we can assume that President Harris will be an enthusiastic advocate for this and other neocon military adventures. And President Trump says that he will reopen negotiations with President Putin
here we
and
go.
end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign.
Oh, here we go.
Last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war.
I know what's going to win over the American people. I support President Trump because he's willing to negotiate with Putin. This is definitely like the issue that American voters are going to turn over on. You know, when I think about what would be most effective at being a spoiler candidate and pulling people over to the right, this is the one that I think of.
To tackle chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech, our constitutional freedoms, to clean corporate influence out of our government, or to defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point...
Trump will throw Ukraine under the bus in a heartbeat. Oh yeah, no, the Trump administration has always been like an ally of Putin's. The links between Trump's team and Russia aren't a secret. There have been arrests and trials and prison sentences and a whole goddamn Senate investigation into it. You know, it's not... People still think that's a conspiracy. Like, dude, it's literally on the books. It's not... What does he mean with chronic disease? Probably some, like, vaccine denialism thing. I don't know.
Where he has asked to enlist me in his administration. I'm speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. Less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, Callie Means called me on my cell phone. I was then in Las Vegas. Callie is arguably the leading advocate for food safety, for soil regeneration, and for ending the chronic disease epidemic that is destroying America's health and ruining our economy.
This is 100% like a COVID vaccine thing. Like when he says chronic disease, I think what he's referring to is like we're vaxxing our babies up to the gills, so it's making them all sick all the time or whatever. It's not, but I think that's what he's referring to.
Callie has exposed the insidious corruption at the FDA, the NIH, the
exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There. Yeah. Yeah.
NHS, and the USDA that has caused the epidemic. Callie had been working on and off for my campaign, advising me on those subjects since the beginning. And those subjects have been my primary focus for the last 20 years. I was delighted when Callie told me that day that he...
Here we go. Yeah, it's on his website. End the chronic disease epidemic. When JFK was president, 6% of American kids had a chronic health condition. Today it is 60%. Rates of autoimmune diseases, diabetes, ADD and ADHD, autism, obesity, asthma, food allergies, and other chronic health conditions have been skyrocketing. A lot of it is just because we didn't test for that shit 60 years ago, you know? Like, a lot of it is just we didn't... Our both ability to and willingness to engage in close medical scrutiny of people's health has increased significantly. And then obviously, like, the shoe drops very quickly. During RFK Jr.'s first week in office, he'll convene a meeting at the National Institutes of Health to declare a major shift in priorities. The federal government will refocus its $50 billion medical research budget towards chronic disease prevention. Kennedy will start funding studies into the cause of chronic disease, including toxic chemicals, air and water pollution, microplastics, electromagnetic pollution, ultra-processed foods, and pharmaceutical products. The main way you know that this is completely delusional is because his term, chronic disease epidemic, apparently refers to every condition a person can have. What do you mean you're going to investigate autoimmune diseases, ADHD, autism, asthma, food allergies, and obesity by looking into pollution, microplastics, electromagnetic pollution, ultra-processed foods, and pharmaceutical products, which he put at the end there because he's real slick, by the way.
He had also been advising President Trump. He told me
he means GMO, 5G cell phone towers, and vaccines. That's what it means. Electromag's 5G conspiracy. I know. Yeah, yeah.
Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects and to explore avenues of cooperation. He asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and closest advisors in Florida. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues. In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals, That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately, and fiercely if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. But we are aligned with each other on other key issues, like ending the forever...
Hold on 1 second. Here we go.
Reporting that RFK Jr. is getting ready to endorse you. What does he bring to you? What have your conversations been like? What role would he have either with your campaign or in your administration?
Well, I don't want to get too much into it because you're telling me something I don't know, other than I've always been friendly with him. I've had a lot of respect for him. I think he respects me.
Very
We've had a good relationship for a long time. If he were going to endorse me, I would consider it a great honor. I think we're leading now in the polls. We're leading in the swing states. We're leading in the polls. A couple of great polls came out just now. But I would love to have his endorsement. That'd be a great honor.
That's despite all the things he said about vaccine, 9/11 conspiracies. Does that reflect on you if you put him in your administration?
No, it doesn't mean administration, but certainly having his endorsement, because things that he agrees on, I also agree on. You know, there are many things that are perhaps the opposite of what you're saying, but he's a respected guy. He's done a good job. And I think he likes the job that we're doing in so many different ways. But if he endorsed me, I'd be very honored.
Reporting that RFK Jr.
Nice.
wars, ending the childhood disease epidemics, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans.
He means when the FBI encouraged social media companies to censor COVID misinformation. Again, it's always COVID. It's literally always COVID. Whenever he says something that sounds like it's a broader political thing, he means COVID. Regulatory capture of government agencies, he means COVID. He means the pharmaceutical agencies and their like relationship with the CDC. That's it. It's just COVID. It's not COVID. Sometimes it's Russia. Sometimes it's Russia, though Russia did push a lot of COVID misinformation. So,
and interfering with our elections. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or even to speak with me. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I'm convinced that it's the best hope for ending the Ukraine war and ending...
Me when my job is convince the median voter to vote for Trump. I'm here. You know, it's a sad decision for me to suspend my campaign, but I'm glad it'll bring an end to the Ukrainian war. What are you talking about, dude? He's so bad at this. It's going to be so funny when all this goes down and it leads to like no change in the polling numbers.
The chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside.
COVID.
And for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children, above all things. In case some of you don't realize how dire the condition is of our children's health and chronic disease in general, I would urge you to view Dr. Carlson's recent interview with Kelly Means and his sister, Dr. Casey Means, who is the top graduate of her class at Stanford Medical School. This is an issue that affects all of us far more directly and urgently.
Wow, crazy. It was on Tucker Carlson's YouTube channel. Callie and Casey Means, How Big Pharma Keeps You Sick and the Dark Truth About Ozempic and the Pill. Who could have seen this coming? Yeah. I was a nurse of 22 years who quit during COVID. Good.
Urgently than any culture war issue and all the other issues that we obsess on and that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Today, two-thirds, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. And during the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had
Wow, that's crazy. It ended up being about COVID again. It's everything, dude.
16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth. We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who dies
I don't need to like debunk all this, do I? This is like loony conspiracy shit.
COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from
I thought it was 6%. The number on your website said 6%. Now you're just saying less than 1. I guess it doesn't matter. You've lied about like everything else, so we don't like you. What if you don't have to be consistent with reality? Why would you need to be consistent with your own talking points? He just says a new number every time. I bet. Yeah, probably.
from 1% to 66%. In America, 74% of America.
Again, obviously, this is all incorrect. Any statement on medical health, like on a nationwide basis, which includes in its categorization obesity, ADHD, and asthma in the same category, can be instantly disregarded. Different conditions are caused by different things. Sometimes they can be caused by changes in the way we identify the condition. Sometimes they can be changed by environmental factors. Sometimes they can even be cultural factors. If you group all these together, you're denying, like you're making it impossible to evaluate any common trend in how they've manifested. And also, none of this is like a secret. Oh, you're telling me more people are diagnosed with ADHD today than were diagnosed with ADHD 60 years ago? That's brilliant. That's so smart. Did they even have ADHD 60 years ago? Or did they just call you like, I don't know, did they say you like the Latin word for speedy and then they put you in an insane asylum, you know? Like, it's completely meaningless.
Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were
120? We didn't even have like modern grocery stores 120 years ago. What do you like? We're going back.
They were sent to the circus. There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown.
I think they would also have sent RFK Jr. to the circus 120 years ago. Look at him. Listen to how he sounds. I feel like they would have probably thrown peanuts at him. Like, you're telling me this would have been, like, normal back then? They probably would have assumed you were dying or something. I don't know.
In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3%, compared to 50% here. Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president, I was a boy. Juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic, and the mitochondrial disorder.
I blame high fructose corn syrup in the industry. Oh, 100%, yeah. But you would have to say that specifically. Remember, he wants to investigate 5G towers and vaccines for this. Like, yeah, obviously, it's high fructose corn syrup. The reason why people in Japan are skinny is because they eat a lot of fish and rice. Their foods are relatively unprocessed, and they don't consume anywhere near as much sugar. That's the reason why. That's it. That's it. That's literally it. Also, they walk around more often. A lot of Japan is walkable. They take like trains. They walk from X to Y and Y to Z and so on. Over here in America, we drive everywhere, and a ton of our food is artificially sweetened in ways that are very unhealthy, but very cheap to make. So, you know, Japan also has a higher rate of eating disorders. It is also true that in Japan, if you are a woman and you have a slight tummy, they will string you up in the company office and paddle you like a piñata and scream like, wait for the fat to fall, wait for the fat to fall, you know, and then you die and they just keep you up there and they write fatty on your corpse. So I'm not saying we adopt the cultural attitudes that Japan has towards fat people. I'm saying that maybe we should eat more sushi. Maybe sushi should be cheaper. You know, the ingredients that if you're living in a coastal city and there's not a local place where you can get like you know, spicy tuna rolls for $3 or $4. That's a crime. Seaweed, sticky rice, a little bit of spicy tuna, you know, maybe like some cucumber and avocado. It's not rocket science.
It caused diabetes, also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes, and it's costing this country more than our...
Wait, what? Alzheimer's is now classified as diabetes? I assume that was a misspeak, because I don't think that makes any sense. Like, okay.
Military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid. ADD, ADHD.
Those are not illnesses. They're not sicknesses. They're differences in how people's brains work. Conditions.
Speech delay, language delay, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500.
A lot of these didn't even get tested back then. Also, narcolepsy in the same category as autism? What are you talking about?
Now autism rates...
Eugenicist vibes? Oh, 100%, yeah. This element of the conspiracy right wing has always been very Nazi adjacent in their attitude towards... To them, like the neurodivergent and the degenerate kind of overlap categorically. Or they talk about how Jews control Big Pharma and Big Pharma is meant to make of us all, and in that sense they're spreading degeneracy the same way that like Jews in academia spread critical race theory or gender theory or whatever. Obviously it's all complete bullshit, but it's like there's a reason why this is all like spoken of so broadly that it becomes useless.
Kids are 1 in 36 according to CDC nationally. Nobody's talking about this. 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the United States military.
This is also something the Nazis were concerned about. If your thought on neurodivergence is these children can no longer serve the military, then congratulations, you are like 1-to-1 with the thinking of the American eugenicist movement leading into its inspiration to the Nazis. Like that, like literally 1-to-1. Would you say they're burdensome? Would you say they're hungry mouths, RFK Jr.?
What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day? There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing.
Oh, this is also a really, really, really good thing that you can look for to instantly disregard what a person is saying. If they keep repeating nobody's talking about this, they're almost certainly lying to you. Conspiracy theorists love the feeling that they possess secret knowledge that other people don't have. In reality, what he's talking about, the fact that autism is more common or diabetes, you seriously think the news media doesn't cover the fact that obesity is an epidemic? That shit was like Michelle Obama's 8-year plan as First Lady to force me to eat shitty vegetables instead of delicious brownies when I was in high school. You know, they love saying over and over and over again, like, nobody's talking about this, nobody's talking about this. They are.
This is only happening in America. About 18%.
Also, that's not true. Obesity rates are rising all over the world. So are diagnosis rates for conditions like ADHD and autism. That's just a lie. That's just completely wrong. In every developed country, these things are increasing. America's no longer the fattest country in the world anymore. We actually compare like pretty close to a lot of other countries.
And by the way, you know, there has been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say. There's
been no change in the diagnostic methods for autism in the past 60 years? Really? Is that true? He's just saying shit, man. Jesus. You can just get away with saying anything.
There's been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34. I'll repeat, in California, 1 in 22. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them? About 18% of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young.
I don't know the details on fatty liver disease in American youth, so I can't really contest this point specifically, but I think it's safe to say that if he's objectively been lying about every point I do have knowledge on, you can probably safely assume it for the points that you don't have knowledge on. I wish we could return to a point in politics where if a person ended up being egregiously wrong on only a single point while they were giving a speech, that would be enough to invalidate every single thing they've said. You know what I mean? This isn't like an off-the-cuff discussion. You're giving a planned speech with a script. If there's something up there that fails the fact check, like in a blatant, obvious way, why would I listen to anything else? What else are you lying about?
And the young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. And 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall, and 500,000 children on SSRIs. So what's causing this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits.
Want to take any guesses, chat? It's actually all me.
The first and the worst is ultra-processed food. About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means
Ultra-processed, by the way, isn't a real word, and it doesn't mean anything. High fructose corn syrup would be the thing you're most concerned with here. There's nothing wrong with processed food at all. Processing means that it was altered to make it better for human consumption. Would you go out there and just eat a corn thing with the husk still on it? Like a corn stalk with the husk and just bite into it? No? You like it when they remove the husk first? Well, that's processing. Processing is normal. It happens to all the food that you eat. Ultra-processed food is fine. There are specific things that are done to food, usually because it enriches corporations, that make it worse for you. High fructose corn syrup being the big one, because you can use it to artificially sweeten basically anything, and it's cheaper than actually using sugar. Now, of course, eating a bunch of sugar is also probably not good for you, but there are ways that and like there's trans fats and it's a complicated subject, but generally speaking, Zoom. He means things like hot dogs being ultra processed. That's the thing, though. There's nothing wrong with hot dogs. Hot dogs aren't like it's not a mystery how they're made. You grind up sausage and you put it in a casing made of intestine or sometimes like a synthetic edible material, and then you cook it. It's got a snap to it, you know. It's pretty. You know, it's like they grind up a bunch of stuff. You know, I guess it's fine. They've always done that. Is adding high fructose corn syrup to make it more addictive to children not processing? Well, yeah, but I'm saying there's nothing wrong with processing in and of itself. I'm saying that there are some things that can be done to food to make it worse for you. Processing, that's why ultra-processed food is a dumb term. First of all, ultra-processed? What are you, 5? Is this the Power Rangers? Hentai shit? Second of all, like, the type of processing makes a big difference. You know, that's very important. There's nothing wrong with GMOs. We've been genetically modifying food for a long time. Sometimes the processes that we've been using to do so go back thousands of years. There's nothing innately wrong with it. It's just a matter of like what the outcomes are. Plus ultra processing, yeah. Pull up the watermelon photo. Yeah. Processed meat legally refers to meat cured with nitrate salts. There's strong evidence that it contributes to colon cancer. If there's a medical reason to believe that it's harmful, then I think that should be investigated and regulations should be put in place appropriately. I'm just saying that this broad category is just conspiracy fuel. It doesn't mean anything, you know? It doesn't. Trust me, an RFK Jr. presidency would not immediately go after food companies for high fructose corn syrup, would not get rid of like corn subsidies, would not go after the meat industry. Like, I promise you, this all comes back to conspiracy shit, which means GMOs, vaccines, so on and so forth.
Industrial manufacturing in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of whom formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food.
Here, from health.harvard.edu, what are processed and ultra-processed foods? Some foods are highly processed or ultra-processed. They most likely have many added ingredients such as sugar, salt, fat, or artificial colors and preservatives. Ultra-processed foods are mostly made from substances extracted from foods such as fats, starches, added sugars, hydrogenated fats. They may also contain additives like artificial colors, flavors, or stabilizers. Examples of these foods are frozen meals, soft drinks, hot dogs and cold cuts, fast food, packaged food, cakes, and salty snacks. None of this means anything. This is literally meaningless. This bears no relationship whatsoever to the health of a product, or like how good it is for you. Basically, it's everything we eat. Vosh, stop! Oh my God, no! I'm not submitting to the low IQ conspiracism on this. Ultra processed means it has added things like salt, made from things like food. If you actually examine how the sentence is structured and what is in there, it doesn't mean shit, dude. It literally, it's like food is food. Okay? It doesn't mean anything. I encourage you, if you want to look into it, like there are certain things that are done to food, like there's documentaries and stuff on it, you know? It's not crazy conspiracy stuff or anything. It's not processing itself that's the issue. It's what gets put in the food. And you can target that specifically without deferring to this weirdo conspiracy shit. Chat doesn't like this one because people got a lot of like weird, like it's like the people who think GMOs are bad or whatever, you know. It used to be like a left-leaning position and now it's not.
More addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, our medicine, and our environment.
Our medicine.
Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. These assault on our children's...
Vosh being needlessly pedantic. I'm actually being the opposite of pedantic. I'm discouraging the use of terms that don't provide much meaning. If ultra-processed just means foods that are processed but a lot with other additives that, like, it doesn't... Cooking any meal then becomes ultra-processed. You know, baking involves adding multiple ingredients that are derived from other foods, right? You're telling me you're adding starch, baking soda, yeast, salt, butter to your regular ass loaf of sourdough bread. Ultra processed. Like, shush. It doesn't mean anything. It's not useful. It doesn't provide information. You want to focus on specific things that are done to food that make them harmful to you, which you can look up. It's mostly, again, it's the corn syrup, man. The corn syrup. That's not a conspiracy thing. It's just done because it's cheap and it makes food addictive and filling. Well, I don't know if, maybe not filling necessarily. Satisfying? Why is Vosh being anti-science? Please, I care a lot about this. I'm not like a food scientist or anything, but I really don't like conspiracy theories. I don't like that way of approaching civic problems. If you're using terms that are so broad that they stop meaning anything, you make yourself really susceptible to bad narratives here, okay? If you care, you wouldn't just dismiss things without knowing anything. I don't... This is all you've been talking about today. I think that you're avoiding the point that I'm trying to make. I'm not saying that ultra-processed isn't a term that has a definition. I am saying that in parlance, in common use, in the way we talk about these problems, if it is so broadly defined that it would include almost all of the foods that we eat, you can't fairly incorporate it in criticism of unhealthy food, because at that point, you're not criticizing anything specific. You're criticizing things that apply to all kinds of foods. Good, bad, pesticides or no, GMO or no, healthy or no, starch, corn syrup or no, trans fats or no. And at that point, you're like not providing much useful information, right? The whole point of a category is that it should provide utility. We create categories, okay? So let's move on from this, okay? Vosh is just wrong on this. The term is not exact, but a lot of industrially processed foods are bad. I have never said that a lot of industrially processed foods aren't bad. I never disagreed with that. I'm going to ban you for not listening. I never said that. ultra-processed foods linked to higher cognitive decline, stroke risk. Yes, Rogue Dravidian. And food is also linked to higher cognitive decline and stroke risk, where the more of it you eat, the more likely of it you are to have. It's such a broad category that it doesn't provide any useful information. More than 70% of the food supply in the US consists of ultra-processed foods. Wow, so it's not very useful for talking about what's wrong with it. Are you telling me that 70% of the food supply in the United States is like being altered in a way that is harmful to you directly? And if that's the case, okay, in what way? What alterations? The addition of salt, of sugar? What has been done to it? Literally, yes. I feel like we're really interrupting the pace and cadence of this video, but we're gonna start coming down a little bit harder on you guys, okay? You guys are being really dumb right now. This is basic taxonomical application. If a category is so broad that it stops providing you useful information, then the category isn't being... This is all I'm talking about. But what you think I'm saying is food isn't unhealthy, or food that has a lot of unhealthy components in it aren't necessarily bad for you. You're deliberately misunderstanding me because you, like people who like RFK Jr., think you're in possession of secret knowledge. You think that there's a tidbit of knowledge that you have, a little like trifle of information that I'm ignoring because I'm stubborn or something. But the only statement that I've made here is that I think we should be specific with our language when we're talking about the problems with our food supply. This is an almost inarguable statement, you know? It's almost impossible to take that one on. But you're getting upset with it because you think that I'm saying that the term itself doesn't have meaning. And I'm banning Phoenixite for having the audacity of starting all this.
And hormones is unrelenting. And name just one problem. Many of these chemicals increase estrogen because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors. America's puberty rate is now occurring at age 10 to 13.
This is everyone in chat who disagreed with me. You all now support this man. Congratulations.
Which is 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in 1900.
Why is he crying? He's choking up at the beauty and majesty of children hitting puberty earlier, you know. And I'm not saying nothing about his predilections. All I'm saying is that he calls children precious a lot.
Our country has the earliest puberty rates of any continent on the earth.
What does that mean? I don't even know if this is I don't even know I don't even know what I would do to contest that.
This isn't because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cause of this tragic epidemic of chronic disease, it seems almost crass to mention the damage it does to our economy. But I'll say, it is crippling the nation's finances. When my uncle was president, our country spent $0 on chronic disease. Today,
What? The federal government spends no money on... What?
government healthcare spending is almost all for chronic disease. And it's double the military budget. Oh. And it is the fastest growing budget item in the federal budget. And chronic disease costs more to the economy as a whole, costs at least $4 trillion, 5 times our military budget.
I don't even know how to like dispute this. It's so out there. And does he mean Medicare? Does he think that all Medicare costs are because of this? Notice how a real economic populist might say something along the lines of the ways in which pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies are able to fleece the government and charge them exorbitant prices for the care they provide for people who are on Medicare or Medicaid. But instead, what all of this is like our vaccines and 5G towers are making people sick, and we spend a lot of money trying to cure it.
And that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People who worry about DEI or about bigotry of any kind, this dwarfs anything. We are poisoning.
Yep. DEI or bigotry of any kind, DEI, BLM, all of it squarely falls under the incredible importance of ADHD, autism, obesity, literally everything that goes wrong with a person, ostensibly, allegedly. What are we talking about?
The poor. We are systematically poisoning minorities across this country.
What?
Industry lobbyists have made sure that most of the food stamp lunch program, about 70% of food stamps and about 70 or 77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables. There's nothing that you would want to eat.
We process fruits and vegetables too. Fruits and those you can. We do process those, and they can be processed. Okay, Vosh was right. Never mind. Oh yeah, sorry. My apologies. We're observing now in real time the incredible utility of this term. They're not eating processed. They're only eating processed foods. They're not eating vegetables. What are you talking about? Rip to his email inbox. Yeah.
We are just poisoning the poor citizens, and that's why they have the highest chronic disease burden of any.
The way we consume so much ultra-processed food in America is really show. Please! It's not because it's ultra-processed. Processing is a value-neutral term. Talk about the actual elements of the food that are causing it. Too much salt, too much high-fructose corn syrup, too much deep frying, whatever. There are changes made to the food that you can identify it specific. Like ultra-processed, everything's ultra-processed. This hairbrush is ultra-processed. My phone is ultra-processed. Everything, the protein bar that I eat is ultra-processed. It's all ultra-processed. It doesn't mean anything. Did you know that Americans get fatter as they eat ultra-processed food? Yeah, because ultra-processed food includes all food. You're not eating mangoes you picked from a tree, motherfucker, okay? Just say specifically what it is. If you're eating a brownie, you don't need to say it's ultra-processed to describe why it's bad for you. There's a chemical ingredient list of the brownie, and you can point to some of the ingredients in there and go, yeah, I think that when they added that one, I think that's why my tummy's big, you know? Again, the vagueness is being employed deliberately by him because it gives room for conspiracism. It's like the food version of just asking questions, you know? If you make a claim and you shoot it out broad enough where you're like, oh yeah, we need to investigate what's going on with all these ultra processed foods and how we're being poisoned, but you're opening up enough space for people to hit you with the not insecurity, the conspiracy beam. What would the umbrella term be that you'd use to describe these issues without listing every single one? I wouldn't. There's no utility in unhealthy food, I guess. Unhealthy food. You guys do realize that the myth that processed food equals unhealthy is one of the main contributors to obesity, right? That's one of the biggest pieces of misinformation that we have in the world when it comes to people eating. The belief that organic equals healthy and processed equals unhealthy. That the obsession with like conflating those terms leads to a lot of people making really bad decisions when it comes to their health. Not processed, ultra processed? You gotta be kidding me, man.
Any demographic in our country and the highest in the world. The same food industry lobbied to make sure that nearly all agricultural subsidies go to commodity crops that are the feed.
You just don't understand the term ultra-processed food. You guys are really tedious. You know that? You guys are really, really, really tedious sometimes. Unprocessed or minimally processed foods are whole foods in which the vitamins and nutrients are still intact. The food is in its natural or nearly natural state. These foods may be minimally altered by removal of inedible parts, drying, crushing, roasting, boiling, freezing, pasteurization, suitable for safe and consumption. Unprocessed or minimally processed foods, carrots, apples, raw chicken, melon, raw unsalted nuts. Processing changes a food from its natural state. Processed foods are essentially made by adding salt, oil, sugar, or other substances. Examples include canned fish or canned vegetables, fruits and syrup, and freshly made breads. Most processed foods have 2 or 3 ingredients. So, first of all, a lot of people say that processing food makes them unhealthy, which is just if that's the case, then welcome to life and death, okay? Because all the shit you're eating is processed. And by the way, the carrots, apples, raw chicken, melon, and raw unsalted nuts, congratulations, motherfucker. unless you're getting that shit farm to table, I guarantee you you're dealing with preservatives as well. Okay? It's okay to eat canned vegetables, though they might not taste as good. Some foods are highly processed or ultra processed. Let's find the super duper hard lines, the really specific determining factors that separate processed foods, which the wise minds in chat assure me they're not disparaging, and the ultra processed foods, a very useful term that you for some reason are obsessed with getting me to bend the knee on. Some foods are highly processed or ultra processed. They most likely have many added ingredients, such as sugar, salt, fat, and artificial colors or preservatives. Hold on, I thought that processed foods could also have salt, oil, sugar, and other substances. Can processed foods have artificial colors? Artificial colors aren't that bad for you. They're just like color. They don't really hurt you, you know? Oil, can you have, well, oil's a kind of fat. Okay, so far it just sounds like they're processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are made mostly from substances extracted from foods, such as fats, starches, added sugars, and hydrogenated fats. Fats and hydrogenated fats, added sugars, but also added ingredients such as sugar? Oh no. Oh no. I'm detecting hints of unclear taxonomy. I'm detecting hints of blurry, vague definitional differences that don't necessarily elucidate anything meaningful. Hydrogenated fats are really bad. Okay, so is the definition of an ultra-processed food one that contains a hydrogenated fat? I'm sorry, it seems that it's made mostly from substances such as things including hydrogenated fat. They may also contain additives like artificial colors. You already mentioned artificial colors. Hold on. Whoa, wait, hold on a second. They most likely have many added ingredients such as sugar, salt, fat, things that can be in a regular non-ultra processed but still processed food, and artificial colors or preservatives. But then you say again, they may contain additives like artificial colors and flavors or stabilizers. But wait, hold on. Artificial flavor? What does that mean? All food has flavor. Do you mean artificial flavor like the thing that makes grape taste the way grape does in Candidy? Well, that's a chemical, okay. But is that meaningfully different from adding sugar or salt, which are also molecule chains that we taste that add flavor? Added flavor and color. We already mentioned artificial color, but again, artificial color doesn't necessarily hurt you. Like, it's just like red food dye isn't like, you know, what are we on about here? Examples of these foods are frozen meals. Oh, just all frozen meals. That's crazy. Why is Vosh pretending to be stupid? I can lead the horse to water, but I can't make you drink. You're getting the perma. I don't know what to do with you. I don't know what to do with you. I don't know why you're so insistent on this. I don't know if, like, you've got a crazy parent who, like, really drilled this shit into your head and now you're getting mad at me. To be fair, I think the article means frozen TV dinner meals. Frozen meals can be made of all kinds of different stuff. It's literally just a meal that's frozen. Soft drinks. Okay, what's in a soft drink? Syrup and a lot of sugar. So is it the syrup or the sugar that makes it ultra processed? How is a soft drink necessarily more ultra processed than it just being processed, you know? What's the difference? Hot dogs and cold cuts. Why? Because of preservatives? But processed foods also have preservatives. They say right here, canned fish and canned vegetables. What do you think? How do you... How? Fast food, all fast food. Packaged cookies. Wait, packaged cookies are ultra processed, but freshly made bread? Why does it specify freshly made in processing food, by the way? Do they mean homemade? What do they mean freshly made? What do they mean by that? That's kind of a weird... What do you mean by that exactly? Presumably less preservatives, but canned fish and canned vegetables and fruits and syrup have preservatives. I don't know. It's getting a little bit vague in here, isn't it? Isn't it a lot easier to describe specific chemicals and specific additives? Huh? Wouldn't that be easier? It's extremely vague. If you disagree with my assertion that it's extremely vague, I actually do think you're kind of an idiot. I'm sorry. I do. Most preservatives aren't even bad for you. Yeah, a lot of people don't think that a lot of people think that preservatives are like necessarily harmful too when they're not. Like there are lots of different preservatives. I love how Vosh's chat proves on the daily how conservatives still manage to exist. You guys are engaging in some deficient logic right now, okay? Again, my only position is the vagueness of the taxonomy. I have no idea why some people in chat are so angry about this. Like, it's genuinely crazy to me. I don't, like, you're engaging in this, like, it's not even essentialism. I can't relate to you. I'm sorry. I have no idea why you're like the way you are. Anyway, examples of ultra-processed foods include salty snacks. What the f does that mean? Salty snacks. Really? This is on Harvard. Harvard Health Publishing. From Harvard Medical. Salty snacks. My dick is a salty snack. Yum. What are you talking about? And it's au naturel. According to a study published in the BMJ, ultra-processed foods are the main source of calories in the U.S. Yeah, because it includes, like, all food. And contributes almost 90% of the energy we get from added sugars. Yeah, because the definitional category includes added sugars. Obviously, it would do that. Oh my god, man. Learn to identify processed foods. Minimally processed, processed, ultra-processed. Corn, canned corn, corn chips. Apple, apple juice, apple pie. Potato, baked potato, French fries. This doesn't mean anything. This is like health information given to and by an idiot. This doesn't teach you anything. Wheat, flour, cookies. What? Wait. Minimally processed is the wheat, which you can't really eat on your own. Processed is the flour, which is literally just ground wheat. But ultra processed, that's when you bake something. What are you talking about? This is complete bullshit. This is pseudoscience. Chat's on their ultra processing slop arc, while I'm on my raw wheat pill. I'm, what is it, demure? Me chewing on a, grinding it with my teeth. But not too much, because if you grind the wheat with your teeth too much, it becomes flour, and thus you've processed it. So then it becomes unhealthy. You want to eat just raw kernels of wheat, and then allow the acid in your stomach to attack it. And that's actually the only way. Neanderthals, back when they were eating meat, they were cooking, not literally, but metaphorically. When they started cooking the meat, though, I don't know about that one. No chewing? Yeah, well, chewing is a form of processing. Unironically, if turning wheat into flour is processing, then turning food into chewed food is also processing. You have to throat that shit. You're telling me that you're gonna chew the carrot as you eat it, but that reduces some of it to carrot juice. You're reducing it down to the fiber and the juice when you bite into it, which processes it. You want to go, you know, you want to be sword swallowing every meal. I'm glad we all had an opportunity to give me, you know, we've been watching RFK Jr. for a bit, and I appreciate all of you giving me a shot to, like, be a snarky, belligerent asshole for a bit, even though I stand by everything that I've said. Oh, wow, on the Wikipedia page for ultra-processed foods, some authors have criticized the concept of ultra-processed food as poorly defined in the NOVA classification system as too focused on the type rather than amount of food consumed. Other authors, mostly in the field of nutrition, have been critical of the lack of attributed mechanism for the health effects, focused on how the current research evidence does not provide specific mechanics for how ultra-processed in diets affects body systems. Some authors versus other authors, very specific. I hate you guys. I hate you guys so much. I hate you. Even digesting the food is unhealthy, Vosh. I prefer to consume my wheat rectally. You haven't even gotten to how most ingredients only matter in their amount. Well, kind of. The main problem, as far as I'm concerned, the main problem, honestly, is that we just turn corn into everything, and then we put it in all food because it makes it tastier and higher calorie, but we're not, like, filled up. You know what I mean? Like, it, there is a benefit to eating organic, but it's not because the processing is bad. It's because the cheapest way to process food is to add the bad stuff, you know? But you can also find good processed foods that are good for you, even ultra processed foods. It just depends on what they put into it. Can we finish this? I can't believe this shit, man. We're 3 hours into the stream. Let me free. Welcome back, RFK Jr. I assume the editors are gonna like cut that bit out and make it its own. Yeah.
Feedstock of processed food industry. These policies are destroying small farms and they're destroying our soils. We give about, I think, 8 times as much in subsidies to tobacco than we do to fruits and vegetables. It makes no sense. If we want a healthy country, the good news is that we can change all this. We can change it very, very quickly. America can get healthy again. To do that, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to root out the corruption in our health agencies.
Wow, that's okay.
Second, we need to change incentives in our healthcare system. And third,
change incentives in our healthcare system means that if you have pre-existing conditions, you don't get healthcare. I know that dog whistle because I remember it from the Republican days right after Obamacare. I remember that shit. That's exactly what that means. Incentives in the healthcare system means, oh, we'll incentivize you to lose weight. Because you're not getting your foot amputated unless you drop at least 20 pounds.
We need to inspire Americans to get healthy again. 80% of NIH grants go to people.
Doesn't he mean incentives to doctors? I guess he could mean that, but I also hate him.
Who have conflicts of interest. These are people, virtually everybody who says, Joe Biden just appointed a new panel to NIH to decide the food recommendations. And they're all people who are from the industry. They're all people who are from the processed food companies. They're deciding what Americans, here is healthy. And the recommendations on the food pyramid and what goes to our school lunch programs, what go to the program, the Swiss program, the food stamp programs. They're all.
I agree with all of this. I do think this is a serious issue with corporate or regulatory capture, where the FDA is full of people who have been lobbyists or people who will be lobbyists for food companies, and as a consequence of that, their recommendations are jacked, and there are plenty of examples of outright corruption. The problem is, of course, that his solution to this would be replacing all of those, regulatory capture individuals with, I don't know, lunatic conspiracy theorists?
Corrupted and conflicted individuals. These agencies, the FDA, USDA, and CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations. 75% of the FDA's funding doesn't come from taxpayer, it comes from pharma. And pharma executives and consultants and lobbyists cycle in and out of these agencies with President Trump's backing.
I'm sorry, hold on. Did President Trump during his presidential term stop that from happening? Or did he in fact preside over one of the largest and most obvious examples of regulatory capture across the board? Like in every federal agency, he put in like people from the fossil fuel lobbies, people from private school lobby, like every corporate-backed individual possible. He did that.
To change that, we're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists.
I don't think he's saying Trump was better. Are you sure?
Cycle in and out of these agencies with President Trump's backing. I'm going to change that. We're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists and doctors who are free from industry funding. We're going to make sure the decisions of consumers, doctors, and patients are informed by unbiased science. A sick child is...
Unbiased science, like all of these vaccine skeptic podcasts that I listen to.
The best thing for the pharmaceutical industry. When American children or adults get sick with a chronic condition, They're put on medication for their entire life. Imagine what will happen when Medicare starts paying for Ozempic, which costs $1,500 a month, and it's being recommended for children as young as 6, all for a condition, obesity, that is completely preventable and barely even existed 100 years ago. And 74% of Americans are obese. The cost, if all of them took their Ozempic prescription, is $3 trillion a year. This is a drug that is made by Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe. It's a Danish company.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Let me hypothetically argue that every single American who is overweight or obese is all going to get on Ozempic, and all of them are going to have that Ozempic paid for by Medicare, and all of that is going to be paid for at its current rate by the government. And now let me get mad at the number that I've made up. What?
The Danish government does not recommend it. It recommends change in diet to treat obesity and exercise. And in our country, the recommendation now is for Ozempic to children at age 6.
Is that? Can you find me an FDA paper or like statement from the FDA that recommends Ozempic be prescribed to 6-year-olds? Can that be found? Can somebody find that for me?
Novo Nordisk is the biggest company in Europe, and virtually its entire value is based upon its projections of what it's going to sell, of the Ozempic it's going to sell to America. And we have the food lobbyists have a bill in front of Congress today that is backed by the White House, backed by Vice President Harris and President Biden to allow this to happen. This is $3 trillion cost that is going to bankrupt our country.
Wait, what? Wait, what?
Backed by, have a bill in front of Congress today that is backed by the White House, backed by
A bill? What? An Ozempic bill? What is the bill?
Vice President Harris and President Biden to allow this to happen. This is $3 trillion cost that is going to bankrupt our country.
What is the bill to formally put every American on Ozempic and have the government pay for it? What is he talking about? What is this? The bill that forces everyone to take Ozempic? I don't want to take Ozempic. I don't support that bill. I'm voting for Donald Trump now.
For a fraction of that amount, we could buy organic food for every American family, 3 meals a day, and eliminate diabetes.
Ozempic is highly overprescribed. Yeah, I agree, and it's an issue, but it's not being prescribed as part of like Medicare to every 6-year-old. It's not, or Medicaid, I guess. It's not even possible.
These altogether. We're going to bring healthy food back to school lunches. We're going to stop subsidizing the worst foods with our agricultural subsidies. We're going to get toxic chemicals out of our food. We're going to reform the entire food system.
What is toxic? Again, the use of terms like this is also like conspiracy bullshit. Toxic chemicals? What do you mean? Like, sure, there are some obvious ones like carcinogens or whatever, but the shit that's making people fat, they're not toxic chemicals. It's just like added sugars and stuff. And everything's a chemical. Everything is a chemical. That's you can't.
And for that, we need new leadership in Washington. Because unfortunately, both the Democrats and the Republican parties are in cahoots with the big food producers, Big Pharma and Big Ag, which are among the DNC's major donors. Vice President Harris has expressed no interest in addressing this issue. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation.
I think he means big agriculture, not big egg.
Of corporate and neocon power. And our children will be the ones who suffer most. I got involved with chronic disease 20 years ago, not because I chose to or wanted to. It was essentially thrust upon me. It was an issue that should have been central to the environmental movement. I was a central leader at that time, but it was widely ignored by all the institutions, including the NGOs, who should have been protecting our kids against toxins. It was an orphan issue, and I had a weakness for orphans.
He keeps talking about kids. I maybe it's his voice. I don't know, man.
Watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I had 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends, and I watched these sick kids, these damaged kids, in that generation.
Yeah, if you think that Republicans are going to back this agenda, do remember what happened when Michelle Obama tried to make eating a little bit healthier in America. The document calls for the Trump administration to reverse nearly 200 rules and regulations. Yeah.
Almost all of them are damaged. And nobody in power seemed to care or to even notice. For 19 years, I prayed every morning that God would put me in a position to end this calamity. The chronic disease crisis was one of the primary reasons for my running for president, along with ending censorship in the Ukraine war. It's the reason I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. But I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do. And that certainty gives me internal peace, even in storms. If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch chronic disease burden lift dramatically. We will make Americans healthier.
It is genuinely crazy that he's bending the knee like this when he hasn't even been given a guarantee of a cabinet position. That's why he keeps saying, I will do this under Trump, or if I'm given the chance to do this, you know? He hasn't even been given the promise.
Again, within 4 years, America will be a healthy country. We will be stronger, more resilient, more optimistic, and happier. I won't fail in doing this. Ultimately, the future, however it happens, is in God's hands, and in the hands of the American voters and those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is
You guys excited to have him heading our health services? Because that's what he's gunning for.
a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I'm 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I can't imagine that President Harris...
Love saying that as Trump will be like 83 in the White House if he wins, that you are 70, have only a decade to be effective.
President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After
He literally caused the death. Oh, yeah, no, he might as well have murdered those kids. Yeah.
years of President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through. His son, his biggest donors, his closest friends, and all support this objective. My joining the Trump campaign will be a difficult sacrifice for my wife and children, but worthwhile if there's even a small chance of saving these kids. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country...
Why is he crying? The worm is trying to escape his body through the tear duct.
...is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other. That's why I launched my campaign to unify America. My dad and uncle made such an enduring mark on the character of our nation, not so much because of any particular policies that they promoted, but because they were able to inspire profound love for our country and to fortify our sense of ourselves as a national community held together by ideals. They were able to put their love into the intentions and hearts of ordinary Americans and to unify a national populist movement of Americans, blacks and whites, Hispanics, urban and rural Americans. They inspired affection and love.
Please let it end. It's almost done.
And a culture of kindness that continue to radiate among Americans from their memory. That's the spirit on which I ran my campaign and that I intend to bring into the campaign of President Trump. Instead of vitriol and polarization, I will appeal to the values that unite us, the goals that we could achieve if only we weren't at each other's throats. The most unifying theme for all Americans is that we all love our children. If we all unite around
He really
that
does
issue
talk
now,
about children
we can
so
finally
much.
give them the protection, the health, and the future that they deserve. Thank you all very much.
Great. Please, God, let it end. Oh, my God. Yeah, altogether, I really don't think this is going to do much to boost Trump's campaign. That was a really weird exit speech. Like a really, really weird one, you know? If anything, I think actually the endorsement of RFK Jr. opens Trump up to a lot of criticism and scrutiny. A lot of the people who have pledged support to RFK Jr. have only done so because they've seen his policies online or maybe like one or two things from him. Yeah, I don't think it's going to amount to much. It is kind of crazy though. I don't think he's done a very effective job of being a spoiler candidate for Republicans. This was an ultra processed speech. It's bad for the health. That's true.